Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi with Business Spotlight. Joining me today is Alison Potter, who is the owner of Expected Outcome in Calgary. Thanks for joining us today, Alison.
Thanks for having me, Mario.
Well, let me just start by asking you, can you explain a little bit about what Expected Outcome is and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. I'm a registered nurse for 40 years, over 20 years of those in palliative care, which is my passion. And I launched my business a few weeks ago, Expected Outcome. The title comes from death is the expected outcome of life. Mm-hmm. And so I give seminars and I facilitate other speakers to give seminars and events on things related to dying, death, loss, grief, and bereavement.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about your background? Like, what drew you to palliative care? It's not a not a quote unquote sexy occupation, so to speak. You know what I mean, right? You're dealing with death, and you're dealing with dying people. What was the appeal to you to work in this field?
Yeah, honestly, when I was 19 years old, I was a student nurse in London, England. And I had some time off from my studies, and I was working as a healthcare aide at an agency. And they asked me if I'd work a night shift at a hospice. And I said, well, what's a hospice? And they said, it's a place where people go to die. And I was like, oh, that sounds terrible. Yeah. But I went and did the shift. And by the time I left at 7 a.m, I was like, this is the kind of nurse I want to be. So it's always been my passion. It was a slow journey, marriage, kids, working shifts that work out with your kids. But I finally got into palliative care, and I've worked in palliative home care. I've worked on the consult team in acute care. And for 9 years, I was the director of care at a local residential hospice. And like I say, it's my passion. I love it.
Okay, so when the organization or the Expected Outcome, give me a sense of like how many events you might host in a month, or how many things you do on a monthly basis.
Yeah, so I host about 25 seminars and events a month. I have a weekly drop-in grief cafe. The Western world is very much, once you're a few months or a year after someone you love profoundly has died, that, you're getting on with your life. And I think people need a space to just come and be heard and share. Oh. We do a practical seminar, myself and a healthcare aide from hospice. 60% of Canadians will die in hospital. The vast majority of people would like to die at home. Palliative home care in Calgary does provide some in-home support, but there's 168 hours in a week, and they certainly don't provide close to that. So I do a seminar where we literally teach people how to care for their loved one who's become more physically dependent. Okay. I have a speaker who does a trilogy of seminars based around kind of the motif of the mammoth, that talks about, basically your tribe, your village. So one is on who's with you when you get diagnosed with a life-limiting illness. One is on who's surrounding you when you're actively dying. And the other one is, how does your tribe continue without you? Yeah. I have a speaker who does a seminar on medical assistance in dying. She's very skilled in that area with her knowledge, that sort of talks about the legislation, where it is, where it's going, but just really allows people to, voice how they're feeling. 80% of Canadians support medical assistance in dying, but that doesn't mean it doesn't bring feelings up for people. Yeah. I have Blair, who does rituals in life and death, which is just beautiful. Just rituals for people who've died, but also rituals for those of us who are living. For healthcare workers, how do you separate home from work and work from home? Margot does deathbed phenomena. Many people towards the end of life will see relatives who are dead, or they'll be talking to somebody. And it's one of the few sort of areas that some people might be skeptical of that actually has scientific background. So that's really great. Donna does the art of dying, which is for caregivers of someone with a life-limiting illness, just for them to come and focus on a simple craft while Donna and I are there to answer any questions, and just to feel that sense of community. I have Chelsea, who's a death doula. I think the baby boomers, we're information seekers. We're not just going to be told you're dying or your parents are dying and this is our system. We want to know what is out there, what's available. And I think the death doula movement is just really going to blossom in the next 10 years. So Chelsea talks about, what death doulas do, what they don't do, how do you access them, the range of services. My keynote, I guess, seminar is a palliative resource seminar. And so with my experience, I talk people through what is available in Calgary, for what is a hospice, where can you be within the hospital, how do you get palliative care there? What if you're living in long-term care? What if you're on palliative home care? And I sort of intersperse that with discussions on pet loss. What do you do if you wake up and your dog's died? Where do you go with that? Because people don't know. Where do you get support when you're grieving a pet? I intersperse it with the top 10 things you shouldn't say to someone when their loved one has died. And anyone who's had a loved one who's died has heard them all. So just kind of giving people tools to manage. And then one of my favorite ones, I haven't done it yet, it's ready to go, I'm excited, is actually called Dating After Death. Because when you lose a partner, especially, if you're sort of my age, I'm 59, my husband died in 2013. You've been with the same person for 20, 25 years. And to get back out dating, it brings a lot of baggage. What are your kids going to say? What are your friends going to say? What is your partner's family going to say? And where do you begin? And for me, really importantly, the online scams, how to be aware of those and how to avoid those. Donna also does a couple of seminars just on, palliative symptom management. A lot of people, if you ask them about dying, they're scared they're going to die in pain or choking. And we can just address those concerns and how those symptoms are managed. And then she does one just on basically what is palliative care. So it's a whole range. And then once a month, I do a movie night where people can just come and watch a movie that's related to dying and death, and then chat about it.
So what kind of people, do you want or do you want to attract to these events and seminars and workshops, et cetera, that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of people shy away from this. Frank Ossotesky has written a great book called 5 Invitations, which talks about, it's ludicrous to think that you get diagnosed with a life-limiting illness and in the short time that you have left, that you can kind of do your work of dying, that you can do your reconciliation, that you can do your life review. And so a lot of what I look for is people who are brave enough to dig into that. So they either come because they need support for themselves or a loved one, because they're interested, but someone who's able to come and kind of take that step and bravely kind of talk about their feelings. And my hope is always that people leave with a gratitude for living. So yeah. Okay.
And I'm assuming in this day and age, I'm assuming now that they're both in-person and virtual events that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, my hope was that they would all be in person, because I just think, I've got a beautiful little space here. It's got a really nice feel. It's very intimate. And I just think it's a really lovely sense of community when you gather. But I also recognize that after COVID, that people are more used to Zoom. Also that there are maybe people who can't take time away from a loved one to attend a seminar. Maybe patients who are interested, who aren't well enough to leave home. So I am starting some of them virtually, and they don't all translate to virtual. And so I don't want to dilute that experience, but I do have some that are going virtual.
So before I forget, how can people sign up for these events or find out more information about Expected Outcome?
Yeah, so you just go to my website, expectedoutcome.ca, and there's a calendar there, and they click on the calendar link and it shows them when the seminars are, the time. There's information on my facility, where it is. I'm based in Killarney, Southwest Calgary.
Okay. Now I'm curious, Alison, where faith and religion or spirituality and all that kind of element plays into what you do here.
So I always meet people where they are, whether it's their spirituality and beliefs, or whatever it is that they bring. I mean, people's beliefs are people's beliefs. You can't say, oh, yes, I understand that. But
Yeah.
so, and my speakers are the same. We're just, the palliative world, we're compassionate and open and curious. We're curious about people. And, there might be people who are perhaps suffering, related to their faith. And so then I'm happy to step in and find them a resource that can support them. I don't pretend to be able to myself support people who are perhaps having a loss of faith or, something like that, but I'm definitely resourceful. So I can always find support for people.
Now, do you take your show on the road, so to speak? Do you go maybe to a hospice or to a hospital and provide events?
Yeah, I'm certainly always willing to do that. And I think my palliative resource seminar travels really well. And I'm always happy to go and present that. So, if there was a Rotary Club or a community center, I'm happy to go and present that there to them for sure.
Yeah. So where did the inspiration come to start this, and the why?
Yeah. So, like I say, it's always been my passion. I'd worked kind of in the three big spheres within Calgary, and then I took a year off, just to kind of have a break and figure out where I wanted to spend the twilight of my career. And I reflected back to when my husband Kevin died. He died in 2013 and died, got sick and died quite suddenly. And I got so many emails from people that I didn't know that he'd mentored over the years and taught and supported. And I realized, as I was reflecting on what I wanted to do, that when I die, my professional legacy will die with me. I mean, obviously I mentor, I teach, I share, I resource people, but it sort of stops the day I die. I'm no longer able to do that. And so it just seemed like a perfect fit for the end of my career to share what I've learned, what I felt, what I've seen, just share that experience with people.
Okay. And the name, tell me how that came about.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. I'd been trying to find a name for the business. Yeah, I have 3 adult kids and I'd send them names and they'd be like, no, that's terrible, Mom. And I was actually swimming laps in a pool, and I'd read Frank's book recently, recently to that 5 Invitations. And I think he uses that phrase, death is the expected outcome of life. And it just literally sort of flashed into my head, expected outcome. That's what I want to call my business. And so, yeah, that was how it was named.
And as I'm pointing upwards, the logo, what does that signify?
So the logo, it's kind of like an EKG trace, right? That is flatlined. Yeah. And then the actual flower is representing a Gerber daisy. One of the things that I have available for sale at the seminars is what I call gratitude flowers. It's just a simple square vase with rocks and greenery and one Gerber daisy. And I just encourage people to buy them and just hand them to someone and say, hey, I appreciate you. I'm grateful for you. I love you. Because I think all of us know when somebody dies that we know usually the first thing we think is, when did I last talk to them? What was our last conversation? And we shouldn't wait. We shouldn't wait to tell people we love them and that we're grateful to have them in our lives. So that's sort of where the flower comes from.
Okay, so I'm curious at these events that you hold, and especially the in-person ones. What's the mood there? Is it a somber mood? Do we see a lot of tears shed? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, people are expressing emotion, and that we welcome that. I have a little sign here next to my bowl of Kleenex that says crying is welcome here, because I think too often people are shut down. One of the things we don't do is we don't offer Kleenex to people, because as soon as you hand a Kleenex to someone, you're signaling, okay, we're ready for you to stop now. Yeah. So they are available, but we don't hand them to people. But there's laughter, there's joy in remembering our loved ones. There's there's fear, there's the whole range of emotion, but I don't expect people to leave feeling miserable. I find that people leave feeling energized to live, because that's really what talking about dying is about. It's like, let's get let's get this organized. Let's deal with my thoughts, my relationships, the practicalities. And now, hey, now I'm going to go live my life.
Yeah. What, over the years of being involved in this area of healthcare, have you noticed any shift in just sort of the general mentality of people when it comes to death and dying? Are we more afraid of it today than we were in the past? Or are we more are more want to shut it off and not think about it than in the past? I'm just curious about your thoughts and reflection on that.
I think a large number of people don't like to think about death and dying.
Yeah.
But what I feel is that we've become a very death-denying culture. So when you think even 100 years ago, or if you have the opportunity to be at an Indigenous person's funeral, back then it was like maybe the family made the coffin, or there were pallbearers carrying the coffin.
Yeah.
Or there was a wake at the home where, where the person was, so that you're celebrating their life and they're part of that. And we've really moved away from that. People will say, oh, this funeral home was great. One phone call and they dealt with everything. But in dealing with everything, that's how we move through our grief and how we honor the person that's died. So yes, I think we've become a death-denying culture. And I think it has to change. And I feel it really will with the baby boomers aging, because I think they're information seekers and they will want to know that there is a good way to do not just the death and the funeral, but just the work that leads up to it for everybody in the family.
Yeah, exactly. And so, Alison, is there anything else that you wanted to mention that I didn't ask you?
I just think, as I always do whenever I'm talking about death and dying, I like to just talk really briefly about the organization I volunteer for, Give a Mile, which provides free flights for people who need to fly to the bedside of a loved one who is either dying or in critical care. And the reason I like to mention it is because it's tragic if you need to have those conversations that matter and you can't afford to get there, because that is my goal, to support having the conversations that matter. So yes, please come to the seminars. If you're not sure, just give me a call, send me an email. I'm happy to chat to people on the phone to maybe find out which would be a great seminar for them, or to find resources for them. I'm very approachable and very resourceful, and this is my passion. So yeah.
All right, super. Well, thanks very much, Alison. Well, before I forget, how do people get in touch with that organization?
With Give a Mile, you can go to their website, giveamile.org. There's an email on there. There's a phone number on there. You can contact me through Expected Outcome. I'm their community liaison. And I'm always happy to share the word of that organization. And I am a strong supporter of local business. The books that I sell are from Shelf Life Books. My cookies that I provide are baked by a local baker. So I really believe in supporting everybody that is doing good out there in the world.
All right, super. Thanks, Alison, for joining us today.
Thank you. It was lovely, Mario. Take care.
Great. That was Alison Potter, who is with Expected Outcome. I'm Mario Toneguzzi with Business Spotlight. Thanks for joining us today.